10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Well, what's going on, all of our boggies out there? It's episode 48 of Your Brain On.
God.
It is part 5 of our Church Hurt series, but our second part with the wonderful Chris Anderson. In the last episode, Chris shared about his journey with almost 30 plus years in the Mormon church and the hurt that caused. In this episode, he dives in deeper into how that led him into a stint of atheism for 20 years and ultimately how it led him back to Jesus, realizing that Jesus was love. So you're going to want to tune in. Make sure to listen to the first episode for sure before you listen to this one, but enjoy the episode. Well, we've got Chris Anderson back on the podcast with us for part 2, part 4, I think, of some of our Church Hurt series. Last episode, Chris went into his journey through 30 plus years in the Mormon church. Yes. And all of his experiences and
not all of them.
Not all of them.
But
I promise you, there's a whole lot more.
Some big ones.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to the first episode, make sure that you listen to the first episode, "Hurt in the Mormon Church." But yeah, Chris went on a journey of starting to question things, and I remember you said that you saw a short clip of a TV show from a documentary that got you thinking about, whoa, maybe what I believe is a little bit a little bit skewed, and went on a journey, started asking questions, and I don't think they liked that. The Mormon church didn't like that. And then so you went into great detail about that kind of journey of questioning and trying to understand and not really getting answers. And so we wanted to dive into what happened next after you had experienced that and kind of experienced the hurt and the trauma of having people kind of ostracize you or push you away or say you can't question these things or you can't look into these things. What happened after that?
After I was called a son of Satan.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was quite a journey, leaving Mormonism, exiting it. Exiting was difficult because you lose everything, your family, your friends, as it was predicted by my bishop.
Right.
Which at one point actually made me question maybe I should return, despite everything I said in the episode 1. And I started questioning myself. Am I even... Maybe I am. And so for a brief period,
right.
It made me question, because when I did end up getting divorced and lose your family and kind of the stuff they say will happen, makes you question. And I started questioning everything, even my own ability to know what's truth and what's not.
Right.
And how do you determine truth?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I know that you said it felt like a great duping.
Yeah.
Or a great deception.
Yeah, definitely.
Where 30 plus years of believing something and then finding out there's some big holes in it. I'm sure that kind of brings a disillusionment,
Complete disillusionment. I mean, to the point where you question your fundamental faith in God. Does he even exist?
Right.
Yeah. And whether or not you could even trust yourself.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was in the one and only true church, because that's what you're told, and that's what I professed. And when you realize something you believe to be true, to have it pulled out from underneath you, you begin to question everything.
Right.
And that's what happened to me. I questioned everything down to the point where, does God even exist?
Right.
Right. And where did that lead you?
To atheism. but we got to back up first. Because we talked a little bit last time how I started going to Christian churches after Mormonism
Right.
And I wanted to replace my Mormonism. I still believed in God. I believed in Jesus. He was still my Lord. And so I needed to replace atheism or Christian or Mormonism with a Christian church.
Right.
And so for my family's sake and for my sake. And so that was important to me to start going to a lot of different churches, and I did. And I visited a lot.
So did the break apart in your family not happen for a little bit, for a little while? Because you said that for your family, you started going to Christian church.
we left Mormonism, and my first wife and my kids, we all started attending different churches, and we landed on a church we were in Atlanta, Georgia. We landed on a church, and I got very drawn in, I would say, to that church, and I started going all the time. I was in a discipleship group, and I wanted to join it.
Yeah,
I did. I wanted to join. And so, long story short, I wanted to be baptized because I didn't feel my Mormon baptism was sufficient because under the circumstances of all the doctrine and everything. So I remember I wanted to be baptized, but I wanted my friend to baptize me, who was an elder in the church. Like, he was a leader, like one of the top ones. And so I went to him and I said, I want to be baptized. And he said, okay, that's great. And but I don't want to do it like the way you guys do it, because they sprinkle. And I go, Jesus was baptized in a river, so I want to be baptized like submerged. Right. And I felt that was the right way to be baptized, just because Jesus did it that way, through submersion. So, but no, they wouldn't allow me to be baptized that way. And they said I had to be baptized into their church the way they do it. And that was in front of the congregation, which is important. I get that. But I don't think Jesus went down to the Jordan River and they dipped their hand in the water and started sprinkling them.
You wanted the whole thing.
I wanted the whole thing.
Yeah.
I needed a new life, and the symbolism of it. So they wouldn't do it, and that just, I was like, well, wait, why not? The old question, why can't I? Well, that's not how we do it here. And my friend, who was an elder, was willing to do it. It's just the pastor wouldn't, who I'd met with many times, but they said no. And so that was like the start of the second round of questioning for me.
And what was it about that? Was it were you taking some experiences from the Mormon church and thinking, well, the Mormon church was all organized and very controlled, they had to do it the specific way, and what turned out to be was bad? Now you're going to this other church and you feel like is it like the same things kind of happening, where everything's very specific and you have to do everything a certain way and all these like rules?
They did have some rules, but it's a great church, and but I just wanted to be baptized by immersion, and that was it.
And so what happened whenever they said we can't do it that way?
Well, I said, why not? And I never got a good answer.
Right.
Other than, this is how we do it. And I said, well, that's not how I want it done.
Seems like a stumbling block for a lot of people to be able to, I don't know, step into faith, or a genuine person saying, I want to get baptized, and then that being the...
Well, here was the irony of it. If I had been baptized in a different church, not the Mormon church, but another Christian church, they would have accepted that baptism. But in their church, they wouldn't let me get baptized the way I wanted to. So, and I wanted my friend to baptize me, who was my mentor, my spiritual mentor. He's one of my best friends to this day. And then, they wanted me to like sign a contract and do different things. And then it was like, then you're subject to the elders and this. And I was like, this didn't sit well with me, just because of the formality of it and the organization I had left. Mormonism was very organized and very, there's a certain way to do everything.
Yeah. So there were certain hints of that you were like, I'm going to... So you said it led you into a second stream of questioning.
Yeah. So when I couldn't get baptized the way Jesus was baptized, I started questioning, well, wait a minute, what else is a problem? And so I began another round of doubting, and I went down another path where... I just started questioning the Bible and different things and different doctrines I had been learning since I left Mormonism. And they didn't sit well with me, these doctrines. And so, I didn't know how to process. If this doctrine isn't right, then the Bible must not be right. And I'd been taught that my whole life growing up in Mormonism, the Bible is not error-free. They accept the Bible in Mormonism, but it's only accepted, as they say, as far as it's correctly translated. And they say Joseph...
Translated by who?
Well, yeah, by Joseph Smith. He's got his own translation, and that's part of their canonical books. Is they use the King James version, but it's Joseph Smith's translated version.
Okay.
And so they've gone. Joseph Smith went through it, and he started adding and changing some of the scriptures and stuff in the New Testament. And so I grew up thinking, well, the Bible's not error-free. It's got all kinds of errors in it. So for me, it was easy to start questioning the Bible, and I did. And I had an atheist friend who was an ex-Mormon. There's more people like me. And I worked with him, and he sent me these tapes of a professor at North Carolina University, Bart Ehrman. You've probably read his books. Well, he's got a whole bunch of books out. And
Bart Ehrman? Ehrman.
Yeah.
Bart Ehrman.
And he's a pretty well-known scholar on early Christianity.
Okay.
And he heads up the I don't know how to say it, but he heads up the University of North Carolina, their religious studies.
Okay.
He's like their chair, I guess. Or at that time he was. And he put out these series of tapes about the Bible and what do we really know about it, what do we not. And there was all kinds of things I started learning, like as a ex-Mormon, I didn't know, like the Gospels are actually anonymous. Like, and so so that for me was difficult. It's not such a difficult teaching for me now, but at the time it was very difficult realizing, well, wait a minute, the 4 Gospels are anonymous. We don't know who the author actually is, and those authorship was ascribed to it. After the books came out and the Bible was accepted. So I started learning these things, and it became difficult for me to accept the Bible. And so I went down a period of time where I started like learning as much as I could about early Christianity, the Bible, and if you don't want it to be true, you can find reasons to not accept it. And so I didn't want to accept it, I guess, and just started finding reasons not to. And I already believed it wasn't true because of Mormonism, so it wasn't that hard for me to just keep going. Yeah, of course it's not. It's not what it's proclaimed to be.
Right.
And so, I started losing my faith pretty quick, and some of the doctrines I was learning at that church didn't sit well with me. And I don't want to discredit the church because there's a lot of my friends that go there.
Yeah, it's okay.
But personally, the doctrines didn't sit well for me. They've accepted them, but I couldn't.
Right.
Were they things that were at all connected to what you had believed in Mormonism, or were they just different things?
Just totally different.
Things that just didn't seem
it'd be things like, they don't proclaim this, but out of logic, you can get there. And that is, if some of us are chosen for salvation, predestined, then others are chosen for destruction. And that was me, apparently, right? So, or other people I knew who weren't believers. So that was hard for me to accept some of the doctrines.
Yeah. And that really paints a picture of who God is too.
Yeah, and so it was easy for me to start rejecting God and the scriptures.
Right.
And I did, and so I eventually just lost my faith completely.
Yeah.
And you, so when you left the Christian church, what was that experience like as well? So you were Mormon, you left the Mormon church, then you went to a Christian church. How long were you there?
Oh, I don't know, a couple of years maybe at the most.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
And good amount of time.
Well, it wasn't just at that church. I visited a lot of churches throughout that period. But this one I became particularly affiliated with because all my friends went there. And
then when did you leave and why did you decide to leave?
I left after they wouldn't baptize me by immersion. I was like, just, and I was, my marriage was falling apart at the time, and it eventually did. And I think just after I got divorced, and I couldn't put these doctrines together, and it was just easy for me to just walk away.
Right.
And I did.
And then you went into atheism.
Yeah, I became an atheist. Pretty hardcore one.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah, tell us about that. Because I think that you turned away from Christianity and the Christian-based faiths and went toward atheism. Like did you just start diving into reasons why God doesn't exist, or what did that atheism look like for you?
Atheism for me was God was a monster for me. Like I realized God at that time was a monster who deserved the very hell that I was condemned to. And we'll get into reasons why. But I became not anti-Christian at all. All my friends were Christian and remained friends with them, and very close. They're my closest friends. I've always been Christian. But for me personally, I could no longer accept that God was the person they were trying to portray he was in my life. And my life thus far, no, there was no God for me.
Right.
And so I started questioning, well, did I even have a relationship with God? No. And so therefore he didn't exist. In fact, he wasn't the God they were even portraying he was. He was a monster for me.
So like discrediting even the experiences that you had did you have experiences with God, connections with God? As a Mormon, I believed I had experiences with the Holy Spirit.
And that's what kept me going, I think. But in looking back, I didn't have experiences with God. I really not. We'll get later on. But at the time, no. I mean, I thought I did, but I since realized I hadn't.
And when you were at the Christian church, did you have that same type of a thing? Like you felt like you had experiences with the Holy Spirit, or?
Yeah, because it kept me coming back. But again, I always felt, well, you can trick your mind into anything, into believing anything, and I had done it once.
Right.
And so I even started questioning, like, how do you even know if God is speaking to you now? It's like, is it your own thoughts in your mind?
Yeah. So is that what it became for atheism? Was it more of a rebellion and anger, or was it more of a logical pursuit of, I formulated this in my own mind. This isn't, this was emotion, or this was, Both?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm pretty logical. At least I'm told I'm logical. Well, my wife might not think I'm logical at times, but for me, the doctrine didn't make sense. So from a theological point of view, it didn't make sense. And then personally, God didn't exist for me because he was not a good God.
So in your own experiences, you thought either if God exists, he's not the God that these people are talking about.
Right. From a personal experience.
And so even if he does exist, I don't want to have anything to do with him.
If he is God and he does exist, he's a monster.
Right.
And that gets back to, I'll be happy to share. As a child, I was very abused as a Mormon child by an elder in the Mormon church for years. He became my stepdad. And so it was a daily event, being abused. And when we brought it to the church, they swept it under the table completely.
Jeez.
Yeah. Police were never called. Nobody came to my defense. So that had a major impact on my view of God.
Yeah.
And who God was. And as a kid, I do remember praying as a child, like, God, make this stop.
Right.
And I'd pray all the time to God. And I'm like, well, how come if who he says he is, why didn't he make it stop?
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it was for years. It was most of my youth.
Jeez, yeah.
So it was both the fact that you were praying.
Yeah, I prayed to this God to deliver me, and I was like, there's no delivery. Yeah. And so you couple that with, having your religion just cut out from underneath you when you do your personal study on the history of Mormonism and the things I learned through that, how I was deceived there. And then it's, the Bible's erroneous.
Right.
And then it's like, I can't find another church that has doctrine that works.
Right.
And so for me, this was like super
Bye.
easy. See
That's
you
super-
later.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm out.
See ya. I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out. Yeah.
I'm outta
I'm
here.
completely out.
Yeah.
And I did. I
Say.
became completely out.
Right. Yeah.
And so I lived from, I don't know what year, but it was just within maybe 2 or 3 years after Mormonism.
Was there a freedom in it?
Yes, there was for me. There was freedom. There was freedom from the bondage of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And religion can bring bondage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it did for me.
Yeah. What were some of the things that made you feel free?
Free thinking. I could pursue, I wasn't tied to a set of beliefs anymore. And so I was willing to read anything from that point, because I was always told I couldn't read
Right.
outside material.
Right.
So atheism gave me a freedom, and it fit well with science, and it just provided a relief for me that I didn't get within the walls of religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to leave it all behind,
Hmm.
and part of that was the abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember as a kid, my mom was beaten pretty bad by one of her husbands, her second husband, and I can remember watching her getting beat by a telephone, and you yell out to God
Yeah.
to save the situation or save your mom, and
Yeah.
as a little kid, you're like, who else is going to do this?
Right.
And so,
Yeah. I'm so sorry for those
Yeah.
experiences. It's,
wow.
It's not. The sad part is it's not uncommon either.
It's rampant. It's rampant.
People experience a lot of what you're talking about, and that's why I think it's so powerful for you to share your story.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that are running away from God,
Yeah.
or don't want to receive anything to do with the monster,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
monster in the clouds, somewhere who doesn't answer and doesn't respond.
And it's not limited to the Mormon Church or the Catholic Church, but sexual abuse is everywhere.
Yeah.
And physical abuse, and it can be between husbands and wives, parents, children. I mean, it's very dark.
yeah.
So you said that soon enough an emptiness came over you, though, because you had that freedom, obviously the freedom for free thinking, and you weren't tied to a set.
Atheism was great for me.
That's what we're gonna. So I keep hitting your mic. I'm sorry.
It's not like I didn't use it as a license to go just start committing a bunch of sin. I tried to still live what I felt was a moral life.
Okay.
I did get divorced, and within a couple years, I met my wife now, Jenny. And I've been faithful to her, and I tried to be a good dad to my kids, and try to be a good person as we try to view ourselves as good. So it's not like I lost my morals because I came an atheist.
Right.
And most people think, oh, you're an atheist, you're immoral.
Right.
That's just a falseness that people put out there.
And you were living an atheist life, and you did that for how long? How long were you an atheist? Where you were like, this is what I believe, there is no God, or else he's a monster.
Until very recently.
How many years went by?
Probably 20. I could guess. I could piece it together, but it's most of my adult life.
20 years as an atheist.
Yeah.
And what was it that started changing?
As an atheist, I would, I'd go to YouTube and watch the Christian versus atheist debates. I would read books by Dawkins and others, and Sam Harris, and I just intellectually I found that stimulating for me. And so it was very appealing for me as a, somebody who likes to audit things and check out what's happening. Their books were very appealing to me, and they made sense. And so was like, no, I don't believe in God. I would go to churches. It didn't bother me to go to a church, but I didn't believe it.
Right.
I would go to church with Jenny occasionally.
Really? As an atheist?
As an atheist. One of my friends handed me a CD in 2009 of an Easter message by, I call it a mega church in Atlanta. But I listened to that CD, and I decided I need to transcribe word for word what the pastor said. And then I wrote like a 40-page paper.
You're actually insane.
With my responses to why he was wrong at every level.
Right.
Yeah.
So
You were committed.
I was committed, but I wasn't. I was never there to tear down somebody else's faith. As an atheist, I was married to a believer now.
Right.
Jenny's she's a believer, and from the moment I met her, I handed her that paper like the very first time I met her, I think.
Oh my God!
Because it was her church.
And you knew she was going there.
Yeah. Well, when I met her, I'm like, "What church do you go to?" And she told me, and I'm like, "Oh, I got something for you to read."
Oh my God! Just so you know, this is what you're getting into.
Right. And
she was cool with that.
Well, I wanted
God bless
her to know, because I wanted to be authentic. And
Right.
so to me, it was important that she knew where I was with God, because I knew right away she was a believer. I mean, it was very clear to me. If somebody's a real believer, it's not hard to pick them out.
Yeah.
So I knew she was, and so I gave it to her to read, and she read it. She's like, "That doesn't faze me one bit."
Oh,
Wow.
Shoot.
You're like,
Yeah.
this is the woman for me.
I did say that, actually, from the really the moment I met her.
Wow.
I knew I wanted to marry her.
Wow.
Wow.
She just didn't know it.
What's interesting is that sometimes when people have an experience of going the opposite of religion and taking a stance of atheism, they almost push against and don't want anything to do with people who are Christians or who believe in a God, or and I've seen that in people, but that wasn't really where you were.
It didn't bother me, because I was open-minded, but this was her journey, and I had my own, and so it didn't bother me that I wasn't sure if it bothered her, but it didn't bother me.
Right.
And so
I think that says a lot about the way that you were navigating it, and that you were being authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
Without needing someone else and other people to be the same way that you are.
Yeah, no, all my close friends were Christian, and they all knew where I was. Some of them even saw me leave Christianity, and many who were my friends when I left decided not to be my friends, but a few of them stuck around and still were my friends despite my difference in thinking, which says a lot for
that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it said, and to this day, it's powerful witness to me of who they are.
Yeah,
they're true Christians from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you were atheist. You had a friend who was going to a church, and I think it was like an Easter service, right? You told me this before.
Easter service.
And he was like, "Hey, listen to this service. It's about Jesus, or whatever." And he maybe was hoping that you'd listen to it and be kind of persuaded a little bit, maybe about who Jesus is, and that Jesus lived and he died and he resurrected and all that. And then you come back with a 40-page paper as to why this pastor was wrong.
Right.
And then you still stand strongly on those beliefs against, no, I don't believe in any of this. You end up becoming married to a Christian. Yeah. And then you were married you still are married.
We're still married, yeah.
Thank God.
Thank God, yeah. So, but your marriage
that was
continued with that dynamic of you being atheist for a long time, she being a Christian.
Yeah.
And
she didn't sway.
I tried. And for a long time, you were still where you were as well. Genuinely don't believe in God. Yeah. And you had shared with me a story, and if you want to share this too, about when she asked you to pray.
Oh yeah, she's a couple times. I'll tell you two stories.
Okay.
One, she was having. This was only a few years ago. She was having 3 or 4 of her vertebrae in her neck fused together, and so she needed this operation, and it's not life-threatening, but it's not like open heart surgery or brain surgery. But for her, this was a big deal. I think she was really scared to have this operation, and we were literally at the hospital, And she's all decked out with the nice hat they give you, and she had her IV going, and they hadn't given her the juice yet, the good juice that puts you out. And the doctor's like, she's on the gurney, ready for it to be wheeled off into surgery. And they give you a moment with your spouse or to just whatever you're going to do with your spouse, and so we had this little 2-minute or 3-minute moment together that was interesting. She looks at me, and literally she's on the gurney, and she's like, "Chris, do you love me?" "Of course I love you." "Yes." "Then will you pray for me?" Ooh. She's asking an atheist to pray for her, right? What do I do? Do I pray to a God I don't believe in? Or do I make something up and just pray for her because it's important for her? What do you think my answer was? No.
You said no to her.
I said no to her, yeah. And then she said, "But I really need you to pray for me. Will you pray for me? Do you love me enough to pray for me?" I said, "I love you, but I'm not going to pray for you." And I tell that because a couple reasons. One, I felt I needed to be true to myself, as hard as it was for her to hear that. I wanted to be authentic. We talked about the very first part one, being authentic. And for me, if I had to pray for her when I didn't believe, and I truly didn't believe in God, no, I'm not going to pray for you because that would be inauthentic. And so I said no to her, and they wheeled her off down to the surgery room. Fortunately, she had other friends that prayed for her, and she made out. she made it through the surgery. But no, I didn't pray for her.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Was that hard for you?
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was very hard. I just, after I'm like, I guess I could have just done it. I mean, I felt horrible, if I'm being truthful. Not because I didn't pray. I felt horrible for her, that she needed me at that moment. And I said no.
Wow.
I couldn't be the person she needed me to be for her. I couldn't really be there for her. She needed that prayer at that moment. And it was important enough for her to ask me as an atheist.
Right.
But what do you do if you don't believe? I mean,
Yeah.
So that was tough. That was a tough moment in our relationship, I'm sure, for her more than for me.
Yeah.
But
that really exemplifies how much you really didn't believe in God and didn't want to even act like you believed in Him.
No, I wasn't going to
have
pretend.
anything to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to be authentic.
Yeah.
So
what was the other story?
The other one, I don't think I've told you, Daryl. The other one, it was not too long ago. One of my kids had called me. They were having a hard time over something. And this was pretty recent. And I'm telling her a little bit about it because we share between us, get advice from each other. And everything was fine. Like, we were just having a good time. And my son called. I was telling her about it. She's like, "You know what? I'm going to send him the Serenity Prayer." And I'm like, "What? You're going to do what?" "I'm going to send your son the Serenity Prayer." I said, "Why would you do something like that?" She's like, "Because it might help him." And I'm like, "No, don't you dare send my son the Serenity Prayer. I don't want you to do that. I've taught him to be an atheist, and I don't want you messing with his mind with this Serenity Prayer. Why would you even go do that?" And don't. And we ended up getting a very big argument over it.
Wow. And this was, how long ago was that?
A year and a half.
Oh, wow.
That was right before your journey kind of started.
Yeah, it was right before.
Wow.
Like literally right before. And we had a big disagreement, one of our worst disagreements.
Wow.
Ever, because I think she realized this guy, there's no hope for him.
So this was Jenny?
Yeah.
That you're trying, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, this is recent.
Dang.
year and a half ago.
That's actually very recent.
That
I
is
thought it
very
was longer than that.
Yeah. So that was one of those other moments, you know.
Yeah.
But this time I was angry. I was like, no, you're not going to do that. Keep your religion to yourself is what's going through my mind. And
Right.
I don't want you sending that to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it was so innocent on her part. It was just, hey, this, you know, I can't recite it, but I've since read it. It's a nice little prayer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's used in all kinds of organizations, AA and addiction to help people, right? So
Yep.
it's not super. It's spiritual, but not.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm trying to say. With
No,
that,
I give it. It's like give us the strength to change what we can change, accept
it's
what
like,
we can.
really?
Yeah.
That's such a big deal that
Right.
I can't send that to your
Right.
son. And I'm like,
Well, you wanted nothing to do with God. It makes sense.
oh, you
don't-
wanted nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
And you didn't want your kids either.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I had taught my kids. I had donated all the Bibles many ages ago to the
Right.
to charities, so I didn't have them in my house. I didn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really want Jenny putting up any type of Christian stuff in the home. I mean, I let her. But,
No, bless this home.
well, she did, but
As for me and my house,
I just
we'll praise
ignored
the
it.
Lord.
I just would see it and okay, whatever. If that's important to her, I guess I can deal with that. There's
Right.
worse things in life, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I
Did you
was
put up
okay.
atheist plaques and around the house?
No, I didn't. But here's the reality. Everybody knew. I'm not one to be shy. All my friends know. And so I made it well known.
Yeah.
That was who I was, and that's what I believed.
Yeah.
So, can we transition into what brought about the change?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to.
Did
Yeah.
you have something else, Daryl?
Yeah.
No, I was when you mentioned your son, I was going to ask you about a more recent conversation that I know that you had, but maybe we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We don't have to get to it. If we do, we will.
Sure.
But if not, it's okay. Let's hear about the
So
transition.
how did I?
What
happened? Yeah. So we were living in Georgia at the time, and we came out here maybe 2 years ago, roughly. When was COVID? It was right during COVID.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
So we put our house on the market. We wanted to move by her parents. There were some health issues going on, and we're like, yeah, let's move from Georgia to California. Now I know everybody goes the opposite way, right, away from California, but we were moving here, and we did, and it was a summer a year and a half ago. She was going to church with her son Wyatt, my stepson. Wyatt was he at the high school. Some friends had invited him to church, and he started going to a local church here. And Jenny started going with her son. Of course, he's living at home, and I stayed home and mowed the lawn or watched football or cleaned out the garage again, you know, for the 10th time. I just found other things to do. Yeah. So, and she was going, and, you know, she'd come back, and I'd ask her a few questions like, how was church? And I quickly realized the doctrines were the same as the ones I got close to when I was in Atlanta that I wanted to be baptized in. So I was well prepared, I felt, with these doctrines. To
destroy them?
Yeah. And so she's going, and I'm like, and I just didn't like what she was learning. And I don't like it when God is limited. And God is limited when God can only save certain people and not others, right? So for me, I felt, oh, she's learning more of this nonsense. And well, yeah, I'll go with her to church then. And because I can discredit this, and I can probably talk through with her and finally get her to leave Christianity, you know, just, or at least not go so much so we could go do things on Sunday instead of her going to church and I'm sitting at home. I didn't like that. I wanted to spend more time with her, not with God. So if I can go and to her church and then talk with her about what she's learning and discredit it, then maybe we go to the beach instead on Sunday. So yeah, I started going, and pretty quickly I meet up with their pastor, one of their lead educational pastors, and I'm meeting him for coffee. And I just remember the very first time I sat with him at Starbucks, and he looks out and he looks at this tree and points to it. He goes, "What do you see out there?" That points to the tree, and I'm like, "That's a tree." He's like, "Well, I see God in that tree." I'm like, "Nah, I see green leaves. There's no God in that tree." He's like, "Well, where do you think the tree came from?" I'm like, came from a seed? Oh, good. Good answer. "Where do you think the seed came from?" "Another tree." "Okay, Chris, okay, but where did that tree come from, or that seed tree come from?" I said, "Another seed. I mean, we can go on all day. Tree, seed, tree, seed, tree, seed."
Mm-hmm.
So I remember telling him it'll take a miracle from God for me to believe in God. That was my statement to him. I was like, it'll take a miracle. And so I started meeting with him, and he would say, I already knew what he believed.
Right.
I knew it well. And so we would meet, and then I would write 20 pages. And I'd come home, Jenny'd be like, "How did it go?" And I'm like, I've got some writing to do. So I'd write 20 pages, and I'd send it to him, literally, the poor guy. And I'd send it to him of, okay, I'm going to pick areas that I know are difficult, intentionally difficult. And he would send an email back like there was like one sentence.
To 20 pages?
Yeah. And it would make me so angry because I'm like, he's not answering my questions. And he would just say things like, "I don't have a problem with anything you wrote." Now, I didn't know how to take that necessarily, like he agreed with it, or it didn't matter to him, or he's got answers. I wasn't sure. All right. So I'm like, here's another note, and I'd send him another 10 pages. And I was just going back and forth with him, and I just never felt he was actually answering my questions. And I think at this point I was happy if he couldn't answer them, because then it confirmed my atheism.
Mm-hmm.
And it confirmed that what I was believing was true. And so through that process, we became really good friends, actually. I consider him a friend, even though he was a pastor of another church, of a church. And I've always enjoyed meeting with him. Even as an atheist, I enjoyed learning what people believe and talking about it, even though I didn't believe it myself.
Mm-hmm.
It was always okay. So that started me down a path. I didn't enjoy the answers I got, but I'd come home and Jenny'd be like, "Well, how was it this week with him?" And I would be like, "Oh, just more frustration." Mm-hmm. And I'd go with her to church. And I remember sitting in the audience, and it was like I wanted to scream at the pastor every time he brought up, like, God's so sovereign. He controls everything. He controls every moment of every aspect of your life. And I was
like me getting abused.
That's exactly
right,
what. And I would like, whoa, wait a minute. This God caused this. He actually wanted me to be abused.
Right.
And so to me, it was easy to reject from my experience. And I wanted to stand up and shout at this pastor.
Right.
And what he was saying from the pulpit. And it really drove me away again. But Jenny, she stays faithful. She didn't accept all the doctrine per se, but that's not why she was going. She already had faith. And so it didn't matter what he was saying to her, what she was getting out of the sermons, because her faith wasn't dependent upon a doctrine. She had her own relationship with God, separate from doctrine, which I didn't understand. And so for me, it was, well, I'm going to reject this. And I did. But she kept going, and I was like, oh, this isn't working, my plan. I want to be going to the beach.
Right.
And so I finally decided I'm like, you know what, if she's going to just keep going to church, I'm going to go find her a church.
That isn't preaching this.
that I think, would at least not teach these things.
Right.
And so I got on the internet, and I picked the very church that I knew she wouldn't like. Centerpoint.
Our church.
Your church. It was intentionally chosen
to get Jenny out of church.
Well, she doesn't realize this, but the church she was going to, and I don't want to, I love the people there, and the pastor I meet with, I consider a friend, so I don't want to talk negative about the church, but there's a lot of negative things said about Centerpoint,
about this church,
the church, and so I'm like, well, that's the church I'm going to go to, because then she'll reject, right? Mm-hmm. And so I picked Centerpoint, and I went, and she wouldn't come with me. She wouldn't go to church with me. She had her church, and I started going to Centerpoint.
You started going to church by yourself.
You duped yourself.
Right. No.
You started going to Centerpoint to try and get her out of church, and you started going to church.
Yeah. So, well, I was going because
God's up in heaven.
I figured she wouldn't go to Centerpoint, and then I can say, well, see, there you go. I'm going to a church she doesn't want to go to. I tried, and I'm done. Yeah. So, and so I go, and I went for, I don't know, maybe 2 months, and she wasn't going to come to Centerpoint. And she eventually did come to the church, but I still didn't believe in God. I was just going, and then she started coming to Centerpoint, and I think it took her a little bit to kind of loosen up to come to Centerpoint, because she had heard so many negative things about the church.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And none of them were true, but people talk and people say things for whatever reason they have. They have reasons. So, yeah, that was kind of how it started.
Okay.
And how did that contribute to your personal journey of the pains that you had experienced in the past, the things that you had rejected in the past? Now you're coming to this church to try to dupe your wife out of going to church. But how did that dynamic play into your personal experience?
I can't believe you came to Centerpoint trying not to go to church, and you ended up going to church by yourself. And
you came every Sunday. I've seen you here every Sunday since the first time I met you, which was the first time you came after Christmas. You had come to a Christmas service.
Well, she went with me to Christmas. She did not like it. She did not like you throwing snowballs.
She was not about that?
No, not at all. We sat in the back, and snowballs were thrown, and I'm like, this is great, because what church has fun?
Right.
Church is not supposed to be fun.
Right.
And I knew she didn't like it, and so this was perfect. And she didn't come back for I don't know how long it was, several. But
you were coming every week.
Well, because I knew she wasn't.
Yeah.
And I started coming, and it slowly started to change for me when I started coming to Centerpoint. And it wasn't the only church that I was visiting, by the way. You guys don't get all the claim to fame.
No, I know.
I started going to a whole bunch of different churches. But that was a little bit later. I wasn't stuck on Centerpoint. I didn't want to be pigeonholed into a single doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started visiting a bunch of different churches around the valley here. And they were all very similar in theology from the central messages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But Jenny didn't care to go to those, and she was going to hers. So I felt pretty safe. And by the way, this was the one church I knew she wasn't going to. So this is the one I kind of cling to the most. Yeah.
And you at one point you were identifying as an atheist, and then you started identifying as a seeker. And what happened there? Yeah. What was that?
Well, I started going to, I figured I would join some of these I don't know if they're called fellowship groups or study groups, but like Friday they do a men's group.
Right.
Friday morning, and it's pretty casual, and it's not just Centerpoint people. It was individuals from various churches, and the ones I was visiting, Cornerstone, Impact, 412, all these churches, people come and they get together on Friday morning and they just go through the proverb of the calendar day of the week on that Friday, and they talk about it and they have prayer. Well, I thought, hey, this is a great place. There's, a bunch of men who come together. This is a great place for me to ask my questions that they can't answer. And I figured if they couldn't answer them, it confirms my atheism. How do you confirm atheism? How are you going to confirm it? How does an atheist know what he's learning is true? Well, if other people can't answer the questions, then it gives you confirmation.
Right.
And so I figured I'm going to go to this Friday group, and they can't answer my questions, and I'm like, I'm going to meet with the leaders of that group and see what they can do. So I scheduled coffee time with them, and 2 of them met with me. They know who they are. But yeah, and then we met, and they struggled. That, to be honest, they know that, and I know that, and they struggled. So for me, it was, they can't answer it.
They struggled to answer your questions.
Yeah, because I knew which questions are hard to ask.
Right.
But they were genuine questions for me. That's the whole problem.
Right.
These were the questions that were keeping me from knowing who God is.
Right.
At least I thought they were the questions.
Yeah.
And but they were patient. They accepted me a lot. Some of the other churches I visited didn't want me coming and asking questions, and I actually been asked to not come, basically, and ask questions. So that's always a red flag for me if you can't ask whatever question you want.
Yeah.
And so that was difficult for me. Yeah. But these guys, no, they were like, no, bring them on, man.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Let's talk about it.
And they didn't always have to have the answer. I actually appreciated it when they said, we don't know. That was a relief to me.
Yeah.
Because in Mormonism, there is no, I don't know. There's an answer for everything in Mormonism. So for me, when I heard, we don't know that's a mystery of God. God's greater than our mind can think. That was, that's good. Okay, I like that.
You don't need to know everything.
Well, if we know all about God, he's limited,
mm-hmm.
right? He's limited to what we understand about him. So that's not God. God can't be limited. And so I started going to these groups and asking a whole bunch of questions. And I just think through that process, I started questioning myself whether or not what I had learned and why I left religion. And I say the word religion.
Yeah.
I left religion, why that was, and who God is. And they all seemed like they really believed this. I'm like, these guys really believe. They're not perfect. And they don't claim to be perfect. And that was a relief for me also to realize people. And guess what? They were admitting their sins in front of the group. And I'm like, huh? What kind of people like talk about their failures?
Right.
That was an eye opener for me. Yeah. They were humble enough to talk about difficulties they were having, whether it's in their marriage or relationships or jobs or personal sin in their life. And I was like, whoa. Who does that in a group? These aren't self-help groups. They aren't addiction help groups, but these are real guys living out their real lives with real difficulties and struggles. And that, I think, was appealing to me, to see guys who are trying to better themselves, but realize they're not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was appealing for me.
Why was that appealing for you?
Because in Mormonism, you put on a facade. It's the exact opposite, and you're progressing to become God. And these guys wanted nothing to do with becoming a God. They just wanted God to save them. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
And so the gospel of grace was shown through them to me.
Wow.
Yeah. and I didn't understand that gospel of grace.
And that kind of slowly started to...
It started slowly, and I would ask questions about that, and they would, of course, they were very capable of answering those questions.
Right.
Yeah, because they had experienced God in their own personal lives. That's the difference for me. And I started to see that in these groups, and they welcomed me with their open arms, even despite my questions, despite being an atheist. It didn't matter for them that I was an atheist.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so some of the problems you had in the past were you were rejected for asking questions. You were told to stop asking questions, or hey, don't bring those questions here. In both the Mormon and the Christian church.
Yeah,
you
Christian
were asking
churches.
those questions
I mean,
Christian
even
circles
recently.
as well,
Recently. I don't want to say the name, but I joined a study group of another church, and I went and it was on the Book of John. I'm like, what better book could I? But at this point, I didn't realize it, but I'd become a seeker versus a skeptic, and the difference was at some point I said, I'm going to put all my bias aside. I'm going to try to just start the playing field over. I don't know if God even exists. I'm not going to claim he does or doesn't. I'm going to drop everything. I think Rachel touched on this in her podcast with you guys. I heard her say this, and it was like, that's me. I let everything go, my disbelief and my belief.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to start over completely from the start and see what I can piece together, if anything. And if it doesn't piece together, it doesn't piece together. I'm just going to go wherever the truth leads me to.
Right.
Yeah, and you had open hands.
Yeah.
You had reopened your hands.
Yeah.
To okay, whatever happens,
right.
Whatever I discover, I'm going to be okay with.
Right. And it didn't matter. It would go one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so if I remained an atheist, I was okay with that. I'd come to terms with atheism. And that is, there's no hope in atheism. There's an emptiness. If I'm being truthful, there's an emptiness. There's no hope beyond anything beyond the grave. You're going to return to the dust of the earth. There's no afterlife. And there's, I spent a lot of time thinking about that and that philosophy. And it was really hard for me to come to terms with it. But I did come to terms with it at one point and accept it. And this was, okay, well, that might be wrong. I'm not going to take claim that I understand everything anymore, and I'm going to start over and just see where I'm led, and investigate still. And so I'll come and ask my questions. And so that's why I started visiting so many different churches in the valley here, because I wanted to not just get Centerpoint's perspective. I wanted to see perspective from other churches. And so, and so I started asking questions, and all my friends from different churches, they all know how many questions I ask, and they still are okay with it.
So what were some of the core things that you started to piece together that made you more open?
Well, I'll just tell you, most of it I've rejected, or not rejected. I haven't come to terms with yet, but through this process, it was like, okay, this Bible that's in front of me, what do I do with this? Because I've rejected it for my entire life. And there's parts of it, I'm like, I don't know if it's allegory or if it's to be taken literally. I still don't have that answer, by the way. But what I did say, instead of just rejecting it, is there any truth in it that I can pull out that I could say, well, okay, is there something I can grab onto that this book teaches that I can accept as truth? And most of it, I was like, I'm having difficulty because I was looking at doctrines rather than what the message of the New Testament was.
Wow.
And so I decided I would do the red line version of my study, which was just, I'm going to go through it and pick out what the words of Jesus are and see what it teaches me. Because at the core, that's what it's supposed to be about, him and his ministry and what he taught. And so, well, what is that? What is that teaching? And so I spent time going through the New Testament, pulling out every scripture I could think of that went through this, and kind of outlined, well, what's the central message? And I remember a pastor I was talking to, he's like, this was before I went through this process. He's like, so what is it you're seeking there, Chris? Like, what are you after? Why do you come to church? And what is it you want out of this? I don't know, but this I do know. I want to be able to find, what do I sink my feet on as a foundation? What's firm? What's my firm foundation going to be?
What's truth? Yeah.
What's truth? What
I think
can
that's an important question to ask.
and not one that's going to change, because truth can't change or wouldn't be true. So what am I going to stand my feet on? And I think I was doing a lot of self-reflection, who I am as a person. I'm getting older, so what are they going to say at my funeral, right? What are my kids going to stand up and say? Oh, Dad was a good business person. Dad, what are my kids going to say? Those are hard questions for me to answer. So I was like, So yeah, I spent time thinking through what's that foundation, and I believe I found it in the New Testament.
Which was?
Yeah.
Wow.
I love how everything that you do is a cliffhanger. You say things and then you're like,
He lives on the edge.
Yeah. Cliffhanger. It's a good movie.
It's good. Was that Sylvester Stallone?
Well, yeah. What is that? Yeah, let me tell you about an experience that brings that out. Okay, so here I am seeking, and I became a true seeker. You talked about, I think you, Aaron, or Daryl said at some point. Yeah, at some point I really became a seeker. There was a guy, I walked in the church one day and I met this guy behind me, and he goes, "Hi, I'm so-and-so." And I'm like, "Hi, I'm Chris, I'm a seeker." And he's like, But that's how I labeled myself. I hate labels. And I've, been labeled an atheist. Well, okay. But I transitioned to what I would call a seeker. And that's somebody who's really just wants to know the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been a painful process for me, very difficult over this last 18 months to get where we are today at the podcast, because I've had to shed so many of my disbeliefs and doubts, and shed beliefs, things that I thought were true. So basically, my whole world's flipped upside down. I've had to doubt my doubts, and I've had to doubt the things that I believed. So it was been a very difficult process, but I thought and became a true seeker, and it's not too long ago I had what I would say a radical encounter with God. Yeah, and that experience has provided me the foundation to stick my feet on. Yeah, and it was. Well, I'll tell you about it.
Please do.
Yeah. So I was invited to a movie by a pastor of another church. It's all right. You're a good pastor too, Aaron. But you never.
I'm like, a different pastor?
Yeah. You never invited me to a movie.
Hey, you're a good pastor, but where's the movie?
Yeah. Well, how come you didn't pay for my movie? So it was on a Friday afternoon in the middle of September, so very recent. And he's like, "Hey, do you want to go to the movie, you and your wife, with myself and my wife?" And I'm like, "Well, it's Friday at 3:30." So I asked Jenny. Well, she wasn't feeling well, so she's like, "Well, you just go," because she was always encouraging. So I'm like, "Okay." So I text him back, "Yeah, I'll meet you there." And he sends me the ticket. I didn't even bother to look what movie it was. It's like something to do on a Friday. I had nothing better to do. And I go to the movie, and I'm sitting, on my way there. I've been seeking for like 18 months. It's been a while, like a long time. And I think I was ready to give up.
Yeah.
I had just gone down this journey, and I couldn't hear God's voice. I couldn't see God. I didn't know who God was. And I was tired of seeking, tired of putting energy into it, just exhausted, because I had been putting a lot of energy into this by this point.
Yeah.
I really wanted to know, and I didn't think I could hear God's voice. I certainly hadn't seen him. No burning bush or anything. I'd never seen an angel. I'm a skeptic, so you really have to prove it to me. And I was sitting in the movie, I didn't sit with the pastor. I sat with a friend I happened to meet there, who I knew from one of my groups. And he was sitting alone in the very front row. And I'm told the pastor's wife, the pastor was parking his car. I said, I'm going to go down and sit with my friend who's in the front row. So I did. Of course, they were fine with it. And I was sitting there watching the movie, and it started. And for an hour and a half, the movie played, and I watched the screen. And for an hour and a half, I could hear what was being said. But for an hour and a half, God spoke to me that night. Pretty powerful. And my own movie started playing in my mind, like flashing through my life of all these things I'd done in my life that were not pleasing to God. And he absolutely convicted me of these just things that I'd done in my life, from way back when I was a kid, how I treated kids on the schoolyard, to people at work, how I treated people at work, and how callous I've been as a person at work, to how I treated my children and my first wife. Just a conviction on all accounts, on all parts of my life, for an hour and a half. And I was I had a puddle of tears in my lap from God convicting me of who I really was and not who I was portraying myself to be, that inauthentic person, that person who's done some just horrible things in their life, right, over the years. We've all done them. But I didn't think I was that bad. When I go back to that, a year earlier, or a year and a half earlier, with that first pastor I started meeting, he asked me, do you think you're a sinner? Yeah, I make mistakes, I said. Mistakes. Well, mistakes are sin without God. That's a mistake. If you don't believe in God, they're not sin, because sin doesn't exist. They're just mistakes you make in your life. And I had a lot of mistakes at that point. God was telling me all the mistakes I had made in my life. And it did for an hour and a half. And so I'm just in tears during the movie. Unfortunately, the lights are dim. I didn't want anyone to see me. And the credits start playing to the movie. And I'm like, I'm out of here. I don't want my friend next to me to see me. And I certainly don't want the pastor who invited me to see me. So I split, like, before the credits, before the lights come on. I was out of there so fast, and I went to my car. I didn't want to talk to anyone or anything. And so I started to have a conversation with God on the way home. I'm like, God, if that's you, like, speaking to me, it's not good enough. That's not good enough for me. Like, I have so many doubts that I doubted if that was even from God. And I started to question, well, this is just me in my mind playing tricks on me again. It's done it my whole life. So how is this any different? And on my car ride home, I'm like telling God, no, that's not good enough. Even though an hour or 30 minutes before I got to the movie, I was telling him I'm done. And if you don't reveal yourself to me, I'm done. Like, I'm going to start not going anymore to church, or I'm not going to go to Centerpoint or any of the other churches I've been visiting on a regular basis. Because Sunday I'll go to Centerpoint, and then I'll go to another church right after service, because I wanted to hear God's voice, and I wasn't getting it anywhere, not even at Centerpoint. And so this wasn't good enough for me, and God knew it. And I said, God, if this is you, you really need to make yourself known to me. So the whole car ride home, that was my conversation. So I get home, and Jenny's already asleep in bed because she has to get up early in the morning, like super early, 4 a.m. So she goes to bed early, and so do I. But that whole night, God continued to play the movie. I had a lot of mistakes, and all night long, I never went to sleep the entire night that Friday night.
Wow.
And the whole night he played the movie. He helped me remember things I had long forgotten. Things I had done. I was like, I didn't even remember those things, and he was reminding me all night long.
Wow. And
I had tears all night long just from it. And I wake up Saturday, and I'm a bumbling baby. I'm a bumbling baby. And my wife, Jenny, finally goes, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you crying so much? And I was like, I don't know. I can't explain it. I don't want to explain it. Can we talk about this later? And she's like, did I do something wrong? I'm like, not this time, I promise you. You didn't do anything wrong. But no, it was, God was showing me that I needed God. I needed him to save me. And he was showing me all my sin that I had tried to forget about. And so that was all day Saturday. And so then I'm like, that's not good enough. I don't know if this is God yet speaking to me. And so I decided to fast for a week. Yeah, fast and pray. And I said, if this is you, God, you need to make yourself known to me. And for the whole week, he did. The whole week, he spoke to me, and he told me some things I needed to hear about who I was and my need for a Savior.
Wow.
It's pretty powerful for me. I had so many doubts. I was doubting God just over and over, and it was like, this isn't good enough, because if you want me to change or you want me to follow you, you got to make it so known to me that I don't doubt anymore.
Yeah.
And all my friends know how much I doubt. And so this was God's way to speak to me in a way that I can't deny now. Yeah, that he exists, that he's real. And so for the whole week, he was speaking to me, and I asked him to just take any ugliness that I have out of me, burn it out of me, and make me into a new person. And he has.
Wow.
He literally has. Yeah, he's changed my heart and how I view people, and just he's really given me a new life, he transformed my heart. It's not something I did. It's not something I wanted. Mm-hmm. It's not something I did ask for it.
Yeah. But eventually you did.
But I say that, but yeah, I was so contrary to God. I so didn't believe in him. And then boom, this happens. And I'm like, I can't explain this.
Right.
It's not me. It's not, I'm not the one who's viewing all of a sudden somebody different because of what I've heard it over and over, how you should love your neighbor, but it didn't resonate.
Yeah.
Right.
The love of God. And so to answer your question, that core gospel for me is, I think it's best summed up in 1 John chapter 4. And there's 3 passages in 7, 8, 9. And if you read them, it's basically, God loves you so much that he gave his son for you so he can reconcile you with God. And that's powerful. And then the other half of that is he asks us to go love others. And it was something I was incapable of doing. I couldn't love others because I didn't realize God loved me. And until I realized that, and he changed my heart, I just didn't have the capability of loving others. I was nice to people, or tried to be nice to people, but it's more than that. Mm-hmm. It's how you even view people.
Right.
You have to have a transformed heart to see them the way God sees them.
Right.
Mm.
And if you can see somebody the way God sees them, then you can love them, no matter who they are.
Wow.
Yeah, it was powerful for me because I didn't view people this way. I didn't trust people. People were, I was an introvert. So if I know that's surprising to you guys, but I would have considered myself an introvert, and most of you would say, no, he's not an introvert. But it's because God's changed my heart.
Yeah.
And I don't deny it. I can't. And what about the doubts now? Right? You didn't ask that question yet. But before we get to that, so to me, that was the foundation I could sink my feet on. It didn't matter where I go, what faith I follow, what church. If Centerpoint, if I had to move tomorrow, it wouldn't matter to me. Right? Yeah. And that's what I was looking for. What's the teaching? What's the one thing I can grab from the New Testament or the Bible that makes it alive for me, makes it true? And that's the teaching.
Yeah.
And to me, it's the most fundamental, and it's the core of what the gospel is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
God
what
is love. He loves you.
Yeah.
Now you can love him and love others.
Well, he loved us first. That's the thing. And that's what it showed me. Like during that week, he told me he loved me despite all these things that he was playing in my mind. And he had to show me the ugliness so he could save me. That was the difference. And I felt this ugliness I didn't want to be anymore. I didn't want to be that person. And when he took that away, it showed me that he does love me, and he saved me. And so that's it. He saved me when I didn't deserve it.
Wow.
And so, and then it's like, okay, well, what do you do with that? Well, it's the next verse. It's go love. Come follow me, go love. That's what he asks us to do, to love others. And how do you do that? You can only do that if you can see people the way God sees them. And if you can see people the way God sees them, you can love them despite who they are.
Yeah.
And so that was powerful for me. It's been a life transformation for me.
Yeah.
That I didn't expect. I had no idea was out there. My eyes were completely blinded to it. I could read it. You read it. But until God does something to your heart, it's just words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not, I just don't find it difficult to care about other people where before I didn't want to.
Wow.
It's huge.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that experience, that week-long experience of all of your sins and the ugliness within yourself being brought to the forefront of your mind, for 7 days or for that whole week.
Yeah.
It could be easy to think that you were feeling that you would feel condemnation or feel condemned for all the bad things you did, and feel like, oh, I'm such a terrible person, and feel that condemnation. But you just said something that I think maybe makes all the difference, is that in the midst of you realizing and seeing all the ugliness come to the forefront, you had the experience of God saying, I still love you. Yeah. And it wasn't I condemn you for these things, but I love you, even though these ugly things have been inside of you, or, you've made these mistakes. Like, I still love you. And that is, I think, makes a big difference from like the conviction that we can feel of the sin in our lives, that God can convict us of our sin. And it's not a feeling of he's mad at us and he hates us because of it. Yeah. But we're convicted of our sin, and we still know his love. And his love that draws us to him and
there's a big
us.
Difference between condemnation and conviction.
Yeah.
Condemnation is penalty. It's God showing, just punishing you, right? Conviction is different. That's you have to be convicted so you can be saved. You're not going to be condemned to be saved. You got to be convicted. You have to know in your heart that you need salvation. It's something I couldn't recognize. I didn't believe. I didn't believe I needed that until God actually showed me I needed it. And that's how I've been living as an atheist. I don't need God for anything.
And that's not really even the doctrine of the Mormon Church, right?
No, it has nothing to do with Mormon Church, right?
Because you earn it, basically, right?
Yeah, and this is grace theology, right, at its core. and that I struggle to see the grace theology in Mormonism, and it's completely the opposite in my mind.
Yeah.
Because you earn your salvation, and they say, well, you earn it, and then you still fall short, and Jesus makes up the difference. Even that is not grace theology.
It's a
hybrid.
That's a mixed drink right there.
Yeah.
It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid.
I used to listen to a pastor. He always said, grace has to be drunk straight.
Yeah. It's fair. That's a fair comment. I mean, you have to realize, no, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do.
Yeah.
And then God, boom, does it for you. And that's the beauty of the relationship. So I felt, here's the thing. Ever since then, I've felt this incredible peace come over me. That's just the joy. The joy that comes, and the peace, and it's what I want others to have. And you look back, and so to answer some of your other questions, what about, how did you get over the abuse as a child and the bitterness? I had bitterness that I could not shed. I could not shed bitterness. And no therapist could do it for me. Thousands of dollars in counseling, and no, you're still bitter. Still angry at the world and angry at people, and only God can remove that bitterness from you, and He did for me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just been an uplift for me that I can't describe, and the joy I've felt is undescribable.
It would take a miracle.
It would take
for
a miracle.
you to believe in God.
Yeah, and he does. He performs miracles. I believe he does now. Yeah.
Wow.
That's such a beautiful story, man.
I remember you asking questions, and like in our Bible study, how do you know it's God speaking to you? How do you know it's the Holy Spirit, not just something in your own head, in your own mind? And I knew that those questions were genuine. They were. As you mentioned, you've probably been the most authentic person I've ever seen seek Jesus. The way and how authentic and how unafraid you were to ask the hard, real questions that you had inside of you. Yeah. Right? Because sometimes we'll have questions, we'll think, well, maybe I should try to think my way around this instead of asking a question, or try not to think about this question. But you weren't afraid to ask the hard questions because you had come to that place of genuinely seeking truth. Yeah. And you would ask those questions, and then in the moment that you are ready to give up of seeking God, you have this experience that you can't explain in any other way except that it was Him. Yeah. And Him speaking. There's no other explanation. And He spoke to you. Yeah, to me personally. Yeah. And I didn't see an angel. I didn't see God Himself. But there's no question that He was speaking to me in my mind. Wow. And He does speak to us. And the reality is He's been speaking probably through others many times, and I just couldn't see or listen. I couldn't see it. My eyes were blinded to it. But He's been doing that for a while, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. I can think of stories that you shared with me. I'm like, that was God doing it. but not when you're an atheist. It's just coincidence. Well, there are things I was thinking in my mind. I don't think I actually said anything, but I was like, it seems so clear that like God's really chasing after you through some of these things that's happening and what you're sharing with me.
And what the thing is, when I wrote I wrote one of my papers, 20 pages back to this pastor, and I actually told him why God was a monster in my life. I wrote it. And to be able to say that's not God, that God actually is good, is a complete flip, 180, and that it's only come through Him speaking to me. Yeah. Wow. And I have no doubt it's, I have this shirt on today, Doubt the Doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, show the camera over there.
Doubt the Doubt. A friend gave this to me because he knows I've been such a doubter. And but now, here's the difference. A lot of my questions haven't gone away. Yeah. All right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to pretend that all of a sudden I have all these answers to things. No, they're still there. The difference is this experience was so monumental for me that it's caused me to doubt the doubts. And so these doubts I've had, I need to re-examine them because this is real. Like this was a real experience for me with God that I can't deny. It's truth for me. Yeah. And it's the way I want to live my life, actually. You know, I was saying earlier, like, how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah.
I want to be remembered as that guy who loved others.
Yeah.
That is important to me now,
Yeah.
where it never was before. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even care about it before.
Wow.
And so that's, you know, why now I've got to figure out, well, what do I do with all this? You know, this change. It's been so sudden.
Yeah.
It's only been 2 months.
Yeah. And I mean, the journey has been much longer than that.
The journey's been long, but
Journey's been longer than that.
it's been a complete transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife's like, oh, you're the person that I thought I was marrying.
Wow.
You're actually here now.
Wow.
And, you know, we pray together now, and it's just like, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Praying with my wife, Jenny.
Yeah.
It's just like, and our prayer time it's special.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. We do it every morning, and just, if I don't spend that time with her praying in the morning, my day doesn't go well, actually. I always, those days I look back and go, well, we didn't pray today. That's why we have so much anxiety, or I do. But so it's meaningful, and I never believed in prayer, not previously, but God answers prayers. He answered mine.
Yeah.
And I love, he's so silly, God. Because the what you were looking for and what you were asking for, and all the things, all the questions that you said were holding you back from really answering. It's like he didn't
care.
It wasn't like, why did this happen? It was like, look at your sin.
Yeah.
and
he went right for the jugular.
Yeah.
you're saying you know, I mean, in your mind, it's like, if this happened, you're a monster, this. And then he's like, let me play a movie for you.
Yeah.
And then it was like, and it's one of those Job moments where Job's like, almost like,
It's like,
you know, like yelling at God.
Yeah.
And God's like, let me show you something.
Yeah.
You know, let me play you a movie. Let me show you the Leviathan, and let me show you. It answers, and it's always been silly. I say silly because I'm just like, you didn't answer any of it.
No.
You know?
Right.
And I'm like,
Any theological questions.
He hasn't answered the hard questions yet.
no, but he shows you that, and
He shows you that you are sinful.
and that's what brings healing. It's so weird. It's
Right.
like,
Yes.
it's the foolishness of the cross.
It's what I needed to be healed of.
Yeah.
Right? That's what
Yeah.
I needed. I needed to be humbled. I had so much pride. One of
Doesn't make sense.
the pastors offended me. The first one, he knows who he is. I'm not going to say his name. He offended me when he said, "You're prideful." He looked at me and goes, "You're prideful." And I'm like, how dare him say I'm prideful? But he was so right. I was prideful. And it took God to show me that I was prideful, to understand that I was prideful.
Yeah.
Before, I wasn't prideful in my own pride.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm thankful.
You know, before you even had this experience, we had met a couple weeks before that had happened.
Yeah.
And you were going on this journey and doing a lot of research, and you were wanting to find out what is saving faith.
Yeah.
That's what you said, because you felt like you needed to have the faith to believe something that you didn't have the faith for, and you were asking the question, what does it mean to have saving faith? And you started doing these online courses and reading all these theologians
I
about
got like 4
what
books
saving
on it.
faith is, and then we met up, and you came to me and you said, I realized it's not saving faith, it's saving grace.
Yeah.
And it's believing in saving grace.
Yes. Our
And it's-
faith is weak. We all have weak faith. The problem is nobody wants to admit it. Right? We can't move mountains. We think we have this faith that's so great, but the reality is we don't have great faith. And if you think you do, and that's what's saving you, you're mistaken, because your faith can't save you. God saves you.
And I think that shift,
Right? I mean,
I think the shift from what do I need to be able to do this in order to be saved, to realizing God is the one who is doing the saving. It's not about me.
it's the opposite. It's like I can't have enough faith to save myself. Can't. So you have to rely on God to save you. And that's the saving grace, not saving faith.
That's the
I want you to do a sermon on that, Eric.
yeah. Well, I think I have in certain spheres, not on weekend services, but the difference between the faithfulness of Jesus and our faith. Like, I think one of
God's faithful, we aren't.
Yeah, the crux passages is in Ephesians. It's like you're saved by grace through faith.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not of yourselves.
It's not even like, it's not talking about your faith. It's talking about you're saved by grace through the faithfulness, through the faith that Jesus, like that Jesus had faith for you.
He was faithful for you.
He was faithful for you.
We can't have enough faith ourselves to save us.
Mm-hmm. Faith is a gift to be able to even,
So,
that's, I just thought that was, because
why
you
are you
came
laughing?
to this
because it's just weird, man. Like it's honestly so. I just want to go back to God is so silly. It's so it doesn't make logical sense. You didn't get the answers you were looking for.
Right.
You didn't like it. It wasn't this like, let me give you an answer for why this happened or where, you know what I mean? It was it's such a weird, and it makes me want to go in deeper into why is it that he knows us better than we know us? Like his wisdom is beyond ours, because I don't understand why the need for me to be forgiven, it heals everything else. Like, you know, like I don't know what is core in me sometimes that I'm sorry, I'm trying to make this
we're going to do a separate podcast. But a teaser for that one, right? How was I ever going to get rid of the bitterness?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That bitterness from what I experienced. And the forgiveness is not for the offender, right? It's not for the person who did the offending. It's for the offended. It's for me. It was for me. I had to forgive what they did to me. So, and the only way I could do that was to understand that God forgives me first. Yeah. Once I realized God forgave me, then I could forgive somebody else.
Yeah.
And when I forgave those people, the bitterness left.
Yeah.
And that's not, you can't get that through counseling.
Yeah.
And so, forgiveness was for me, not for the person that offended me.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me the freedom, the release, the freedom to be something else,
and to even see them the way that God sees them. Like what you're saying, that's that is a miracle, and that is an immense shift to take place.
It only comes from God.
Yeah.
And I think it's this shift back into what needs to be focused on is again your need to be saved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that is still mind-boggling to me, that me recognizing my need. It's like, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, or who recognize their need. It's like, theirs is the kingdom, you know? And that's this upside down kingdom that Jesus brings, especially in the Beatitudes. It's like, blessed are you who mourn, for you'll become, it's like, it's all these things that they don't make logical sense. It's usually, blessed are those who have completeness of mind because you know all the answers, or you got it together, or you have enough, or you know, and then it's like we call that blessed, and then it's like it's just crazy to me. And your journey to experience that, it just shows me more and more. I'm just like, I don't get it. I just need you to do it. You know?
Blessed is the poor in spirit, those that are broken.
Yeah,
that's who God saves, the broken. Right? Yeah. If you're not broken, what do you need God for?
Yeah.
And so God showed me my brokenness. I needed him to show it, because I didn't believe that I really was that broken. And I doubted him, you know, he does it for Friday night and the movie, and then Saturday, and I'm like still doubting. I'm like, God, you got to make it real more, because I have all these theological doubts. It's totally different than this other side, which is a spiritual brokenness, separation from God of who he is. And so it was an experience that I'm not doubting anymore. He's real.
Yeah. It's amazing. The grace
Yeah.
and all the pain and doubts and the theological issues and personal experiences and all these different hurts, we're talking, the series called Church Hurt, all these different ways hurt can come about through emotional, physical, theological, spiritual, and all these different pains. The healing wasn't in all those things getting corrected or finding the correct answer to all the questions.
The weird part.
The healing came from a recognition of your need for God
and a recognition of your sin.
A recognition of your sin.
Yes. The healing of the heart.
And that God's love is present with you despite all those things.
Yeah.
And it's like having this revelation of the love of God actually put those other things to the wayside.
My
those
friends
things
would
didn't
say,
even matter as
they would
much.
say, God's in us. I'd be like, what are you talking about? God's in you. I didn't understand it. Yeah. He's in you when he changes your heart and makes it into makes you into a new person. He transforms you.
Yeah.
A renewing of the mind and the spirit. That's, it's powerful, and it makes you, if we could only see ourselves the way God sees us, that's powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So maybe the last thing, for those listening who have been, we asked Rachel a similar question.
Yeah.
But who have been through tremendous church hurt, have been through the ringer, maybe are doubting God because of it.
Yeah.
What is a couple things or one main thing that you would share, that you would want to share to those people?
One, God does answer. He does answer prayers. I didn't believe this. It's like, no, he doesn't. I asked him so many times, but no, he has his time that he answers how he answers, and we just, sometimes when we don't get the answer when we think, we need to seek better understanding. And I don't know about individuals' hurt experiences, right? Everybody has a different experience. For me, it wasn't until I could forgive somebody for something pretty horrible, pretty awful, that's plagued my whole life and impacted my whole life. And if we're unwilling to forgive that person, how do we ever expect forgiveness for ourselves? And so if you're hurt by a pastor, the only way to get rid of the hurt is through forgiveness, because it's what brings you restored. It's not that the pastor doesn't need forgiveness. He might have done something wrong. He might have committed a sin to you, right? Offended you, and it's truly did it. That's for him to reconcile with God. But you yourself, the only way to get rid of the bitterness or the pain is through forgiveness of him, of that person. And when you do forgive him, then you're released. So, I think you have to look at your own forgiveness and where you're at with it. Yeah, that's the advice I would give.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
So I've drank a lot of coffee to get to this point.
A lot of coffee meetings with different people.
I spent a lot of time with a lot of people who probably never thought I would be sitting here on a podcast saying this.
Yeah.
So
I'm grateful.
I'm humbled.
For you.
I'm humbled that God has humbled me. Yeah, I thank him for it.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
Yeah, he works miracles.
He does. He does work miracles.
Does.
Grateful for the miracle that he worked in your life, Chris.
Yeah.
I think just hearing everybody talk about it, everyone's inspired by your story and by the way.
It's God's story, not mine. He just used me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, at least that around here that I know that you've talked to, and I think they saw God working in your life, even whenever you didn't. The times when you
saw it.
You were asking questions. You thought, nope.
No, I didn't see it.
I think that we thought Chris is getting close. Chris is really getting close to Jesus.
Everyone on the outside was like secretly praying.
We're like, Chris is really.
No, there were a lot of
Jesus
prayers. People would tell me I'm praying for you. I'm like,
Yeah.
fine, go pray all you want. My wife would pray for me. Go keep praying. I have countless prayers. I know there were, but it didn't matter for me. I couldn't see God. I couldn't hear him. Now I see him, hear him all the time. And it's totally different. He's brought me into relationship with him.
Yeah, and it's so genuine.
Yeah.
Too. That's something that I really appreciate about you.
Yeah.
Is the genuine nature that you seek Jesus.
Well, to go from telling your wife no, you're not going to pray for her. I mean, I was genuine.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be disingenuous. And so I'm not going to be able to deny this ever. God spoke so loudly to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's changed the heart. That's what I see it in myself.
Yeah,
he's changed he's changed my heart. So that's the part I know the way I was before.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you, Chris.
Super grateful.
Thanks for taking time to talk with us and share a bit of your story.
Yeah,
and
it's a pleasure.
In your journey.
Yeah,
yeah, it's been.
And I'll tell you one thing. He said to me, I didn't reveal myself to you to sit in silence. So that's why I'm agreed to come on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I got that message loud and clear.
Yeah.
Like the journey I've been on, for whatever reason, he put me, through that journey, and maybe he's got something for me to do. But he did say pretty loudly to not sit in silence over it, to share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yep.
We love you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
Wow.
It's been good. God is love.
God is love.
That's what
doubt the doubt.
Yeah.
Love each other.
He is love. It's if you get down to it.
Yeah.
So good.
And that's a foundation we can stand on.
That's the foundation I'm standing on. That's it.
Yeah.
Amen.
That's good. From God is a monster to God is love.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that is what we call this episode.
That's the miracle.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of Your Brain on God. Chris, thank you again for joining us. This has been so awesome to hear your story, and I'm sure we'll have you on again in a future episode to talk more about some deeper things and probably more of your journey and stuff like that. But other than that, guys, make sure to follow us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, TikTok, all of the above, and we'll see you next time on Your Brain on God. See ya.